This is a tutorial for the very first time you open AutoCAD. We're going to work on setting up your options and preferences, as well as organizing your workspace so that way you can be as efficient a producer and draftsperson in AutoCAD as possible. In this process, I'm going to demonstrate my preferred methods that I have gathered through years of working in AutoCAD. It's important to note that these are specifically my methods and what I have found to be most effective and efficient. It's important that you take the time to investigate how the tools work and why they work the way they do, so that way you can optimize your production environment to the best of your abilities and to fit your preferences. Whenever we work in AutoCAD, we can't do much until we open or start a new drawing. In this case, I suggest that we open the project name, drawing name blank template that I provide to all students at Purdue. You can either get there by hitting Control and the letter O on the keyboard. You can come to the Open Files button here, or if you've recently opened the file, it will show up in your recent documents. I'm going to hit Control and the letter O, browse to my file location, and select Open. It will often bring up this missing SHX files window. In this case, it's telling me that a shape file is missing. When you end up working in a professional design office, they usually have some custom shape files that define how they want their files to look and operate. In this case, we don't have any of them, so we're going to say ignore. The next thing to come up will be about proxy graphics. Proxy graphics are visual representations, substitutions of what is actually there. There's no point in showing an entire object if we only need a rough blurry version as reference. So in this case, we're going to say show proxy graphics in order to speed up our processing and say OK. So here we see the default standard workspace within AutoCAD. We have a ribbon of tool commands at the top. This might be familiar if you've used Microsoft Office products. To the right, we have some visual view cube settings. To the bottom, we have some command line input areas and some button options. To begin with, the very first thing that I do is grab the little textured grip to the left side of this command line, and I start to move it by dragging it down until you see a ghosted outline of a box. That's going to dock this command line to the base of the screen, so that way what you type never intrudes on the actual drawing space. I also tend to expand this size a little bit so I can see 3 lines. That's usually pretty good for what I want to see from my tool command options. Next, I'm going to edit my view cube settings. Here we have some panning and adjustment tools. I would much rather type commands than click buttons, so I'm going to close this menu. Next, I'm going to hover over this giant view cube, which in my opinion just gets in the way. We're only going to be working with 2-dimensional drafting here in AutoCAD, so there's really no need for 3-dimensional views. When you're hovered over the view cube, you'll see this little arrow show up in the bottom right corner. I'm going to left click on that and choose View Cube Settings. The first thing I'll do is turn off the automatic view cube size and drag this slider to the left to make it as tiny as possible. I'm also going to take the interactive opacity and drag it all the way to the left, so it's completely invisible. When I say OK, you'll see the view cube has disappeared. Now, if for whatever reason you still need to get back to it, you can move your mouse to the top right of the screen, and you see it will show up again, just much smaller and less obtrusive. The next thing we need to do is to get into our project or program settings and commands. Let me maximize my window. I'm going to type options on the keyboard. You'll see when you type a command, it shows up next to where your mouse cursor is. And when I hit enter, you can look down at the bottom of the screen, down here, in our command line box to see what did you just type. This is really helpful because many commands in AutoCAD have other options or modifiers that you can choose while drafting. We're going to leave this Files tab alone, and I'm going to jump to the Display tab first. Here you can change your color theme from dark to light or vice versa. I greatly prefer the dark theme, so I'm going to leave that alone. You can also choose to display scroll bars in the drawing window. I feel like this isn't necessary, considering we can use our middle mouse button to pan around in our drawings. The first thing I'm going to change lives within this display resolution section. I'm going to add a 0 to the arc and circle smoothness, making it a smoothness of 1,000 up to 10,000. I'm also going to greatly increase the segments in a polyline curve from 8 to 800. Why 800? There's really no reason. I just think it's faster to type zeros than to try and replace this with some more logical number. All this is a visual representation of what you see, and it has no output onto, or no outcome to the output of your drawing at the end. Next, I'm going to change the fade control of our XREFs. We'll learn about XREFs at a later date. I'm going to drag the XREF display slider all the way to the left. I'm also going to drag the in-place edit all the way to the left. I don't want things to be faded out. I want it to see them in full register. AutoCAD also operates where your cursor is replaced with a crosshair, and the default size is 5. You can change the size of that here with this slider. I'm going to leave it at 5. I'll hit Apply and jump to the Open and Save tab. The only thing worth changing here is if you're working in a design office that interacts with a lot of machines or subcontractors that use older versions of AutoCAD, you can change the version of CAD that the system will automatically save to here. You can also change the number of minutes between the automatic backup saves. We'll talk more about that at a later date. I'm going to jump to Plot and Publish. Your default printer will clearly be different than this. I strongly recommend scrolling all the way to the bottom and setting your default printer as DWG to PDF. Yes, you can also choose the Adobe PDF printer as your option. I prefer DWG to PDF because it does not automatically rotate your sheets and it leaves them alone. You can also change the location of your standard file save file location here by hitting the 3 dots and browsing to wherever you would like your work to land. I'm going to leave everything else alone here. Under the System tab, you can click on Graphics Performance, if you so choose, to make sure that hardware acceleration is on, and you can change any options in case you're getting any graphics oddities. We'll leave everything else alone here. If you want, you can turn off touch mode in the ribbon panel, considering we're not using touchscreen systems. User preferences is a really important option here. In the old days, right-click on your mouse was the same as hitting Enter or the spacebar on your keyboard. It ended a command. Only recently did they actually bring in pop-up menus into AutoCAD. So I prefer still having that fast hitting Enter option with right-click on my mouse. I don't want to lose the pop-up menu, so I'm going to enable turn on time-sensitive right-click. By doing this, if I tap the right-click mouse button, it's just going to act as if I'm hitting Enter or the spacebar on the keyboard. But if I hold down the right-click for 250 milliseconds, which is a very short amount of time, it will bring up the right-click submenu and allow me to choose some other options. Under the Drafting tab, here is where you can change the size of your auto snap or aperture sizes. We'll talk more about them later. We're not going to be doing 3D modeling in AutoCAD. I think it's a very bad idea. Here in Selection, you can change some selection options. And lastly, under Profiles, if you are going to be moving to multiple computers, if you want AutoCAD on your home computer, for example, or you work in a design office where you move to different machines often, you may want to save all of these commands, options, and preferences that we just set into a file that you can take with you and then import with a couple of mouse clicks instead of changing every option every time you go to a new machine. I'm not going to do that here. I'll just hit OK. At this point, we're done and we're ready to begin drafting.